So, welcome to our monthly talk. We wanted to announce before we actually begin that last month, when we gave our talk, we mentioned that we might have a special guest for this month, but it turns out they're coming next month. So, we believe that we've got this wonderful program set up for about a month from now that will be working with some friends of ours, and we'll put a lot of announcements out about it and all that. And we don't want to hex it by telling you too much yet, but we've been working in the background to get it organized, and hopefully it'll be interesting. And it's on the topic that last month was on, which is this dissonance and this discord that is in the world today. How do we, as yogis, deal with it? And how do we support others through this? And in fact, this week's talk also really helps on that line of thinking as well, not as blatantly by dealing specifically with separatism and racism, but it is a talk that is really important because we're looking at how Kundalini, how Pranayama, and the joining together of the understanding of those aspects of yoga can bring balance into one's own life, and how they can really help to support us as we are out there in the world working and supporting others. So, my thinking this week is the way we're going to do this is to really let Richard take the lead on these. And I have some questions that I have for him that may surprise him, but also that we've talked about. And the reason I want to do that is these two topics, Kundalini and Pranayama, they're almost like these little nuggets of sort of gold that when you start doing yoga, you think, oh, am I going to get to Pranayama, or will I have a Kundalini experience, or you find people who come to you as a teacher and they're flipped out because they've had a Kundalini experience. And rather than look at them kind of in a broad view, we wanted to dive as deeply into them as we can. And so it seemed like really giving it to one of us to go for, and then the other one being the support would be a good way to do it. Plus, I feel like a complete raw beginner with pranayama. And Richard always says, I'm a beginner too. And I'm a beginner too. So, and there are reasons for that. And I think it's really important to recognize where we are with these practices.
That's true.
So.
So I think in our description we talked about pleasure, and this is always a confusing point. There's so many. When you start to get near yoga, or near what we would say is the experience of the middle path, the experience of the mind always gets confused very quickly. And around the idea of the pleasure of yoga, people get confused instantly because, and this is obvious, because they turn it into something they want, and then they'll do anything to get it. Murder. They'll even leave the entire world behind and run away from it, like some of the early gods, like Indra did. They run away and we do that too. I do that, and we all do that, because when we describe it, we get an idea of it, and then we think, well, I have to have that. I have to have, a particular color snake curling at the top of my head, or I have to have, the ability to draw oceans up into my lower openings just by learning the power of these bandhas and mudras. And if I can't do that, it's no good. And if I can do it, then everyone should worship me and love me. And this is almost the joke that most of the yoga teachings look at. And so the pleasure is actually the pleasure of, we could say the pleasure of the self, or the Atman. And then if you go down the street, you talk to someone, no, they say it's the pleasure of no self. You lose yourself or your ego. And so then the other person says, oh, okay, then it's the pleasure of the true Atman, not the Atman that you're thinking of. And they go back and forth. And in going back and forth, both schools evolve. And finally they decide, there is actually something wonderful here that we occasionally taste in practice. And it is so nice, but to even call it pleasure doesn't do it justice. And so that's what we want to get clear. And this pleasure is not dependent on the circumstances. And that's what makes it like the wonderful thing. So your body might not be in good shape. It might be dropping off as we speak. It might be traumatized, or it might be in excellent shape, and you might be, feeling wonderful and buff, but that's not what we're talking about. And but everyone gets confused just in the flash. Okay, and so the first thing that most of you already know these things, but pranayama is actually one of the most delightful things, in the sense of the fact that it gives you that extreme true pleasure that isn't dependent on the condition of anything, an internal pleasure. And as you know, it means Prāṇāyāma, and this is often mistranslated and misunderstood in that we think it's pranayam, yam meaning to kill or to confine or to hold or to... So I'm going to catch my prana and I'm going to make it behave in the way that the books describe. And that's... you can try that, and many yogis try that for a while. And I'm going to hold my breath for, 2 minutes just to start. And then I'm going for the world record, which is usually considered 2 weeks. And actually, there are famous yogis who they go into this state of samadhi, and then their breath is very small. And they say, oh, I'm not breathing at all. But actually, scientists have studied, and there's actually a tiny bit of breath going in and out that keeps the body alive. And so the ego tends to exaggerate things. And so what we're going to do, rather than pranayama, we're going to do Prāṇāyāma. We're going to take the yama away, the control, the discipline, and we're going to let the breath be free. And that's what is meant by pranayama. And so, but the way to do that, paradoxically, is you have to develop practices that show you what the prana is doing. And so this is what always happens is we want to transcend the religious mind, but to do that we have to be religious, or we have to through the help of others, and this is always the key, through the help of, in say the Hatha Pradipika, the help of Shiva, who is the actual guru that lives fortunately within you and manifests as the sun channel and the moon channel right there for your direct experience. And it is by that help that we get these little ways of collecting the mind, making the mind interested in achieving this wondrous state, and at the same time showing you how silly the mind is being, so you can watch your mind and at the same time kind of laugh at it. Oh, it's being so religious. So pranayama is all of these brilliant techniques, and if approached well, can actually begin this awakening process that will clear open the central channel and will actually allow the Kundalini to start to move in the central channel. And at that point, there's this wonderful feeling.
Yeah, and so what often happens is we want a technique. We hear this wonderful idea of, by doing the pranayama practices, then the Kundalini will awaken, and I want the technique. And we get trapped by the technique rather than using the technique as almost an extension of the breath itself, in a sense, a way to liberate the breath rather than anything else. And it's very much like a meditation practice in that you have to train the mind to be able to release the mind, and then have this clarity and freedom in the thought process. And that's the deeper level in all of these practices that starts to arise. But with pranayama, because you can get kind of high from it, especially if you don't do it well or do it in a way that is, if you start doing it a bit too early in your practice, you can get a little lightheaded or considerably lightheaded.
Quite literally.
Or actually go a little bit wonky. And so what ends up happening is we start thinking of pranayama as the practices rather than the practices being the path.
Yeah, as a way of observing prana. And so as we know, that what we're really interested in is if we can observe meaning just watch the wording, if we can truly experience pure prana, which is just pure sensation, pure vibration, that is a profound thing, because the prana has this profound relationship to chitta, or the entire mind, including the imagination and including all of the ideas about prana. They are reflected. So if I have an idea about prana and then that will influence the sensation patterns and lay over my idea about them. And that can be useful, but if it's skillfully done, then you see through that as you experience it. And so we have, it's just like I say, hear the sound, like right now I hear the sound of birds outside. And that helps me, although I've taken a beautiful sound and I label it, I know that bird. And so I'm thinking of the bird, and I'm not actually experiencing the divinity or the pure Shakti of the sound itself. But I hear it again. It could be an excellent... So the practice is to listen to birds, identify them, and then go back and notice that you're identifying. And when you identify them, that is also a function of the divine chitta or mind. But what happens if you're too strict is you start to go, I just labeled that. And then you get mad at yourself. And this happens quite often, quite frequently.
And so the same is true with the pranayama, in a sense, that we do. It's true with almost everything we do, that kind of pattern arises.
Yeah. And so in the Hatha Pradipika, a very interesting text, that they talk about nada, and then nada meaning not nothing, as in Spanish, but it means this pure sound. And of course, nada is referring in sound within the yogic system of all the senses is the one that includes the others. So if I can truly tune into sound without the projection or the creation of a sense object out of it, then I can also do that with vision, then with touch or sensation, and with smell and taste. And then the texts keep you on. Once you can do that, then also with the whole activity of the citta is also given space in, and that's the true nada anusandana, in which you're observing with such stunning, it's not even pleasure, it's with stunning
Kind of awe.
yeah, attention, then you're actually able to have this experience of the central channel. And usually that experience lasts, let's say a few seconds. Okay, we'll be generous. And then the mind very quietly goes, oh, you're experiencing the central channel. Congratulations. Now you can make billions of dollars, selling the central channel to people. Okay, and you get all excited about, all the universes, and you often don't catch yourself for weeks or months, or occasionally, in theory, lifetimes. You don't catch it until what happens is you come back and you find that there's, in the practices, that there's actually this kind of misery going on, or loneliness, because you've basically destroyed your relationships with others. In order to excel at yoga, you've decided, I'm going to leave all beings behind in the dirt, or all beings are just illusions. They're not even really there. Ha ha ha. And this is only true from certain language.
Yeah, or even if you just get so enthralled with the practice, and it has nothing to do with some bad motivation within the practice, but it has this, you're this person who gets up every day and does the practice, and you have this many things you do, and you eat vegan food, and you do exactly the right things that you're supposed to do, and you become obsessed. And so we say this all the time, but everything that we practice with these practices in yoga really highlights the paradoxical states where you must, in a sense, really, obsess on detail, especially with something like pranayama, so that you're not squeezing your nose and too hard, and you're not, huffing and puffing too hard, etc. But at the same time, you don't want to obsess at all. And
or you want to see the obsession.
Yeah.
And in seeing it, you let it go. And then here's the question: when you let it go, it might not necessarily go away completely, but you'll see through it.
Yeah.
And so one of the examples is, if you do Vastrika, or, you just in and out, and you can actually, blow off all of the carbon dioxide. It's not good for air pollution. In other words, you're putting out too much CO2, and you're contributing to global warming. And that's why, you might hold your breath later to make up for that. But you'll get a little bit high, and then the mind says, this is a distraction from life. And so yoga becomes a distraction from life. And this can go on and on and on. And that's
Too bad.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
And it's natural. I think that's kind of a natural stage. And then hopefully with the study of, different traditions and the association with, more experienced yogis, then you say, oh, I'm using yoga as, a way of avoiding the difficulties of life, the big questions. And then you get to start over.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions that that might be relevant. One is, when you talk about Nadanusandana and the breath and the faculty of being able to hear. And when we do pranayama practice, and in Ashtanga Yoga, when we do the Ujjayi breath as part of our practice, that really is this internal sound, this internal mantra that, so we are crossing over in a way. My question is, what do you think of the notion of sort of capturing the mind through the sound, whether it's the bird or whether it's the breath, to then do a practice or do an interfacing with the world or do an interfacing with a loved one, but practicing the capacity to hear as part of the pranayama, and how might, if that does resonate with the way you think of pranayama, how might one cultivate that skill of using sound as part of the pranayama?
Yeah. And so initially with the Ujjayi breathing, you deliberately close the vocal cords and you get this aspirate sound, which is then part of the initial ritual. So we start with these rituals in which we recognize that the aspirate sound is, we call it the Ajapa Mantra, and that it is like a secret name of the beloved, or a secret name of, the beloved in the heart of all beings. That way, having started the Ujjayi breathing that way, it makes you listen to the sound, and then you soften the sound. So sometimes in the Ujjayi breathing, it gets too loud. And it's more like if you're in a room with other people doing it, you say, I can't hear my own breath because these people are so noisy. And it becomes a noise competition. And oftentimes this will dry out the throat. And then what happens is, and you're having not really started it with the intent, oh, this is the secret name that I'm whispering, just for now, you keep doing the Ujjayi breathing. So you're walking down the street and you're trying to hang out with your friends, and they say, what's that sound? Are you okay? And they think that you have asthma, which you might be developing. And it'll give you, and so the idea is that if you set up with the help of the tradition a way that you, listen, and then the sound will naturally become softer. And in many of the pranayamas, you don't do the Ujjayi. It's just, there's special pranayamas, and where you have to then go, and then you give it up. And you completely relax the vocal cords, you let the saliva or the moisture return to your mouth because you've gotten a dry mouth from overdoing it, and you just go, and then you just get back to like, and it's very silent at first, and then you want to hear the silence, and so then you actually become a little more, nada, there's nothing there. This is a silent sound. It's anahata, or a sound that doesn't come from two things being struck together, is the meaning of anahata. And it's the name, of course, for the heart chakra. And so it's like sound, it's a paradox. and then all sounds eventually become sacred sounds, and you're able to hear them. But sound itself is giving you space for the visual field, the tactile, the touch, which is often that's what we think of as, the heart, and then the others. And so it's a very good so the technique is skillful that allows you then to let go of the technique. And this is one of the mysteries of Hatha Yoga, is that you have to have a good technique in which you're getting back to really what counts and really what's important.
And that's really where the pleasure.
And that's where the
resides.
extreme pleasure comes. The extreme pleasure comes from getting back to what actually truly counts. And that we find out as we practice.
And so, one thing that we run into is students who are relatively new wanting to do pranayama, enthusiastic students, which we love. And I was thinking earlier today when we were considering this talk this evening, that when we were first in Mysore together in India, there was a period of time where Pattabhi Jois taught Richard pranayama one-on-one, which is traditionally how pranayama is taught, rather than in a big group setting or something, which can also work. And I was very lucky in that I could go and sit in the room and watch. And to me, that was probably the most impressive demonstration of what pranayama looked like. And I was relatively new at yoga back in the 80s. And so the question that arose for me was, part of why you were in there alone was that it was a small group of people, but Pattabhi Jois used to say he would not teach pranayama to people who had not completed the Advanced Series A. And so it became this, again, a coveted item. But beyond that, why would that be? I mean, I have my answers, but what do you think was his motivation for that? And what is the logic behind something like that, by not jumping in as new students who are eager would love to do? And can you do harm if you go too quickly?
Well, to go backwards, yes, you can do harm if you go too quickly, because motivation counts. And if one becomes, you can get certain powers by doing pranayama. One is and people read about these and they say, oh, I want that power. And then I also want to be saved from death, and I want to get out of this place and go to a nicer place. And so what was nice about learning one-on-one is that Pattabhi Jois he saw what I was interested in, and he would go under, he would take his thumbs to the psoas buttons under the belly, and
but he didn't know they were the psoas buttons.
No, we didn't have a name for them. Okay. Psoas buttons it turns out to be one of the sacred names. Anyway, but he would go under there, and he would make sure that, I was not going too much into the apana, and then dropping the pubic bone, and then he would come under, and it would make the pelvic floor automatically contract. And this is, but at the same time, it would give you that sense of opening and spreading. And so there's an interesting thing in relation to Kuṇḍalinī that Krishnamacharya, and he was saying that one of his ways of getting people to do it is that he tells them, oh yeah, Kundalini actually is behind your navel and up higher than your navel. So he was referring to, if you can feel this area right where the 12th ribs are, or
Kidney wings.
kidney wings, okay. So if you imagine, well, that's the little turning this way, back towards the west, if you can feel that here, then it'll start to work, because you're manifesting the entire pattern of the apana. And so apana, as we know, is the pattern throughout the entire body, inside, outside, that makes you exhale, that is the naga pattern or the serpent pattern, that if you really have strong apana, you're very grounded, at least. And the trouble being with the apana is that it can close your heart until you start really the truer practices of pranayama. So in pranayama, we're getting the prana and the apana to fall in love with each other, so that when one becomes very complete and manifests throughout the body, the other is so happy that it just, because they're in love. And so if I come under, and as I'm trying to do mula bandha, which is sometimes overly worshipped in certain traditions, okay, there's an obsession with the anal sphincter muscles, which can become problematic. What happens is that the heart closes, and you can't manifest the full pattern of the apana, which is the spreading back here, and then the spreading in the back of the head of that naga pattern, the pattern that is represented by Patanjali. And so without the whole apana pattern manifested, then the heart gets closed. But the whole apana pattern manifests for only one reason, and that is to kind of focus on the heart. And so yoga practices without the uniting of prana and apana are very sad, in that the prana is sad because it's all alone, and its true beloved is appearing as its enemy that cancels it, and then the apana is also sad. They're both sad. And so the trick is, if you can manifest when you just inhale, which is the prana job, when you're inhaling, if you can manifest the full pattern of the apana, which feels, we think, you don't have to take it literally, these are just stories, but it feels like that. And that makes the heart open. And so at the very top, you've kept the best of the apana as you're inhaling, and it makes you smile, because it's something very simple and satisfying here. So simple, so satisfying. And also, if you really look at the text, it's not really theistic. It's not really, oh, God has manifested, or the Buddha has manifested, or all of the powers of the different tantras have manifested. It's something like, oh, it manifested, and then you got that taste of it. And so we practice to cultivate that taste of the beloved. And that's the actual Hatha Yoga. And so it's not actually Hatha Yoga until, and the Hatha Pradipika makes this clear, until the central channel actually opens. And there's this extreme satisfaction. Then all of the talk of wisdom is just nonsensical babble. It's like just the talking of a crazy person. And an important stage is when you first start to get this taste, within a few seconds, your mind is babbling nonsense, because it's really making paradox, saying, oh, that's the Kundalini, or that's this, or that's that. And the ability then to see the crazy person, or the nonsense person,
That is you.
Makes you like, oh. And it's kind of, it makes you go, oh. And in that embarrassment, there's great insight, because then you are also able then to see others that you normally see. Oh, that person is a complete fool. I don't know if you've ever thought that about another person. Not about you, no. But even politicians, you might go, oh, that person is a complete. But you start to see that you have that same person, in you. And you start then to like become able to see in other beings, like it's easy to see in certain beings the beloved, and that's also a good practice, to practice with puppies and kittens or little things out in nature that are obvious, that will actually give you the experience. But then to actually do it on the ground in real life situations, which are always have, the background of politics, the background of culture, the background of history, that's the middle path. And that would have to be the Kundalini. So it's quite a profound.
And so often when in kind of modern yoga vernacular, Kundalini is talked about, it is sort of this mystical, snake sort of energy that is quite special, rather than and exclusive, rather than inclusive of everything else.
Yeah.
And one problem that arises sometimes is that when you've done some yoga practices, or in particular pranayama practices, that are a little ahead of where you might be in your development in terms of stability and balance in your own nervous system, your own body, is that you get disruption in the central channel, where you might have a moment of dropping in, and then you can't really grok it or understand it. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we've run into on occasion is students coming to us and being very, very kind of distressed or ungrounded or inflated, saying, I've had this, my Kundalini arose, I've had this Kundalini experience, Kundalini arising. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes this objectified state. And so...
And it becomes, because it's objectified, it becomes embodied in the nadis, in the subtle body, as samskaras. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way the mind works. And then, it can manifest as sickness, it can manifest as all kinds of imbalances, diseases, or different problems.
And one thing that frequently happens is that there's sort of like these jerks that, people feel in their bodies, or when you are meditating, that actually is something that quite frequently people experience, is just sort of involuntary jerks within the nervous system. And if that kind of thing begins to happen for you or for someone then this really simple baby pranayama of emphasizing the apana, of really feeling the end of the exhale every time you exhale, in your practice for a period of certainly a few days, but sometimes a few months to really let the mind rest in the security that is delivered into our own nervous system by connecting to earth through the apana.
Yeah, getting the pelvic floor muscles to finish the exhale. And that if you exhale in stages, each time you stop, the pelvic floor responds. And then sometimes, like I was just thinking of a symptom that actually occurs at certain points that people then is what are called horripulations, which actually means your hair stands on end. And this is one of the things that Krishna in mythology is famous for, is because you get around him, or he himself is like, because of the prana in the skin, which is called vyana, is like totally awakened. Oftentimes his hair will be standing on end, and this is considered something not to be proud of if it happens in your yoga practice. But it's also a very interesting thing. But when it happens, you have to just relax, not go, oh, I've had horripulations, now get a photo. And so, eventually the tendency to want to pull your phone out and take a selfie will become less throughout the practice. And so all of these things in the central channel experience of pranayama, all of the emotions are also, and all of the different possibilities of the mind are considered. They will start to manifest, the scary ones and the heavenly ones. And they say in the actual central channel experience, you're not repulsed by the scary ones, you're not attached to the pleasant ones. Because they're essentially, when you get back to the middle path, the vibration, though, just like the spun is so nice that then you can be happy with that. And we would say you're happy then with relationship, you're happy with whoever that is that's there.
And, I think that one interesting thing is to look at why the serpent is the imagery that is evoked in terms of this kind of experience. And it has esoteric meaning, I know, and it, has also a very practical sort of, if you think of what a snake is and people's fear of snakes and people's infatuation with snakes. And I think if you can talk just briefly about like what is all that about?
Well, snakes, most of the time, unless they're cobras or certain yoga snakes, they go horizontally along the ground, and there's kind of scary, at least if not to you, they're scary to like a lot of animals. And they represent the inconceivable rhythm of nature that is, you can't quite get under control. And so they represent like streams, like the way water flows. It always goes down and slithers down. And so and they're called nagas, and they're usually scary, except to other nagas. They relate, and there's many animals. They see a snake, they're running, and so they represent that which can't be controlled or categorized. They represent that which flows over the categories of thought, as what they call shesha, which means the residue or the leftover. And that's a huge thing, because thought, even though it can spread out and keeps going forever. It can't really contain what it's trying to think about, even itself. Because have you ever thought about thinking itself? The thought, like philosophers get, and the whole thing they're actually trying to describe or think about just spills out of the little categories that they made, all of the different dharmas and religions. And so this Shesha is considered in Tantra and then in Hatha Yoga, which is to be ultimately extremely sacred. And so I was just thinking that in the Hatha Pradipika, when they start the third chapter, because at the beginning, the first verse of every chapter is usually very interesting, and you can see all of the different problems and practices that they're trying to get across. And so what it does, it starts talking about Kuṇḍalinī, which everyone goes, yeah, I'm ready. Let's wake her up inside of me. But before that, you have to give these salutations to the king or the Lord, the greatest Naga, who is Nagaraj, who is actually manifesting as the real world around you, which is completely out of your ability to categorize. And so there's the ritual of, my yoga mat is Nagaraj. It's sacred. It's this divine being who also manifested as Patanjali at a certain point, and Nagarjuna, and all of these great things. And then your shoes and your umbrella and all of the things that support you, they're recognized. And in that ritual, you have actually started to feel, this pillow, this thing around you, start to appreciate it, that it supports others. And then you're ready then to go, so then they say, just as Nagaraj supports all of these worlds, in every way, and if you look inside, supporting every little tiny world and big world, in the same way they say the Kuṇḍalinī, or Kuṇḍalī, they say, who is feminine, a feminine noun, she supports, or she is the support of all of the practices of yoga. And then you're actually ready to look at the same phenomenon of the Naga, except very internally, as the apana pattern, and then as the combining of the prana and the apana in these paradoxical movements in the body. And you can experience that through many different practices, and you start to experience that uniting, and then once that uniting starts to happen, you start to experience the opening of the sun and the moon channels, which are also two divine channels that actually like each other rather than compete. People get, my moon channel is more important than my sun channel, and there's a lot of confusion about that. But actually, they are also represented as manifestations of, Shiva and Parvati, or Radha and Krishna. These are these channels. And that represents, and once they start to balance, then the central channel opens. And you can have all three of them open, but when you balance these two channels with I want to get rid of the sun and the moon channels, because you read about that. I want to plug them up and stop them so they never work again. You're not seeing that what's there as this delightful is just that it's like the horripulations. It's just pure vibration, pure sensation. And there's no need to get rid of it. And you see, there's no need to get rid of time and space and mind. And then that means that you're just getting started in the Hatha Yoga practice. So.
Yeah, and that's when it, as a beginner at any stage in our practice, when you have the moments of balance where it just spontaneously, suddenly you feel a sense of connectedness and balance, those are the indicators that these things that you are that you're doing these practices to cultivate, they are there within you already. And you are doing these practices as a way of waking them up rather than importing something that is some foreign idea. They are really practices that are designed to tune us into the subtle layers of awareness, deep, 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 far deeper than the breath body itself, just deep in the core of the body. And that's what these practices really generate. And at the beginning of this talk, we're almost out of time, but at the beginning I was saying, I feel, and I do indeed feel like very much a beginner. And for me, that's such a relief, because there's, just there's really no expectation that I'm going to get it this time around. I'm just working towards getting it. And so, in that ability to work towards it with curiosity, then I can experience some freedom.
And so the practices are actually a great way of serving others, of helping others, and that really is when they start to manifest, almost as the bodhisattva action, that these practices, even the simplest, are really beneficial. And all of your story, all of the things you think you are, that's also another person that needs a little bit of help.
All of them, all of those stories.
Yeah, so I'm just going to help those other beings who are pathetic, but because I'm so great. But then you start to realize, no, I'm one of, we're all in that same boat, and so there's compassion towards whoever you really are, which.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we should maybe do that one chant.
Okay.
And this is a chant you all know. It's the Shantipat, Sahana Vavatu, and brilliant because it is non-theistic. It's not atheistic. It's just saying that together we do things. Yeah, may we be protected together. May we enjoy together. Because if you try to enjoy by yourself and cut everybody else out, it'll eventually come back to get you. Shall we do it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditam Astu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Thank you.
So we just touched on the idea of introducing you to pranayama, introducing you to Kuṇḍalinī. We encourage you to really explore these practices and take your time. Find a good teacher. If you have any kind of questions, please feel free to be in touch with us and we'll try to get with you. And, really look deeply at these things. They're an important level to the internal practices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it starts to make sense in some meaning of that word,
Yeah.
out of Ashtanga yoga and then 15-limbed yoga, 6-limbed yoga, all of the different tantras. Wow. And it just starts to feel good.
So thank you so much for coming. And yeah, we will stick around for a few minutes for questions and with some answers. I'm going to turn the recorder off, but thank you.